Now that you have Rails installed, it's time to get started on some really basic examples that will demonstrate sort of the outer edges of Rails and what you can do with it. To get started, you need to go to the command prompt. On the Mac, there's a terminal application. It's in the Applications folder under the Utilities directory. I'm looking here, there's Terminal, and it brings up a terminal. And from the command line, I'm going to create a directory to work in. I'm just going to call it Rails. I'm going to change into that directory, and right now there's nothing here. So to get started, we need to create a new application. We're just going to type Rails hello, and it creates a whole bunch of files for us. Nothing is actually running at this point, it's just generated a lot of files. So if we take a look at what's in our hello directory, we'll see the collection of files that are normally created by Rails. Right now we can actually type, just to see if things are running, we'll do Ruby script server on the Macintosh. Writing Ruby is unnecessary, but we'll just make sure that things are actually working. Rails is started, and we'll switch to our web browser and check on localhost 3000 to see what's there. And we've got the Ruby start page. We're off to a good start. Now that we know that Rails is running, we can go back to the terminal, and we'll close the browser, and now we can actually go ahead and create a controller file. For the hello example, we're going to do a fairly simple, we're just going to create a controller, and it's going to be named hello, and it will contain an index method. So our incantation is Ruby script generate controller hello index. As you can see, it'll create a lot of files. Those exists indicate that they're directories that were created when Rails was installed. What's actually created are the hello controller file, the hello controller test file, the hello helper file, and the hello index.html.erb file, which is the last one of them is the one we actually want. So if we get the server running again, and then we switch back to the browser to visit, we can go to hello, and we can find this index file, which is in figure 2.1 of Learning Rails, and is really just a static file. It doesn't tell us a whole lot, except that things are actually running now. Now that Rails is serving us content, we should make some changes so that Rails is actually delivering the content that we want it to deliver. Doing that means that we're going to have to edit some files. An easy way to do that on the Mac is to use Textmate, which does cost money, but is a great way to get into and edit Rails text files. I'm going to open the directory, which in this case I just left at the top level of my my personal setup, and it's the hello application. We don't need to go into these additional folders on the right, because Textmate, as you'll see, now lists them all on the left here. This little directory thing is extremely convenient because it lets you navigate exactly to where in your application things are happening. We were using the hello controller, and here's the index.html.erb file, and if we open it, we can see the basic contents that Rails put into it. It's not very exciting yet. The first step we're going to take is pretty basic. We're just going to replace the default content that was provided here that we showed in the browser with the contents of example 2.2, which I'm just going to paste in. You can see it's a slightly more detailed HTML file, but it's really basically the same thing. All this is testing is that when you make a change, it's actually reflected in the files that you see. So if we go back to Firefox and take a look, we'll reload this file, and suddenly it says hello, this is a greeting, which is more than it said before. Now, it definitely doesn't make sense to use Rails just to serve up static HTML files. So for our next step, we're going to take a look at the controller. The controller is the main logic for your fledgling application here. It lives under the controllers directory in app, and it's hello controller.rb. As you can see, there's not a whole lot going on here yet. but there is an index method defined, and our next step will be to change the contents of that to something that can be reflected in the controller. To make this controller a little more exciting, we're going to replace it with the contents of example 2.4 from Learning Rails. There's not that much going on here, but as you can see, there are 3 variable assignments, one for message, one for count, one for bonus. The prefix @ indicates that it's an instance variable, and we'll have access to those when we get to the view. So we'll save this, and then to modify the view, we go back to the views, hello, index.html.erb file, and we're going to use example 2.5 from chapter 2 of Learning Rails, and it's just a mild change. We've added a reference to the message variable in the title of the document, in the H1 heading of the document, and then we're just calling this bonus thing here as well. These are all called ERB. This is the less than % indicates the start of an ERB. The equal sign just indicates that the processor should incorporate whatever the return value is of the Ruby inside of here. It's just the variable. So what we're going to get is something pretty simple in the browser, just the variable values actually incorporated into the HTML. So if we go back to the browser and we reload our document, we can see that this message came from the controller. Our bonus is there. The hello appeared, which makes sense given that it's the variable for @message. So index.html.erb. The Rails processor went to the hello controller, picked up those variables, and then incorporated them into the HTML for our viewing pleasure. Before moving on, there's one last thing to note here, which is that we never had to stop and restart the Ruby on Rails server. All the changes that were made through editing the files got picked up by Rails, and if you go back to the terminal window, you can see that it's just been running there, answering multiple requests. When you're in development mode, Rails will check each time that you load a file that it has the latest version, and make sure that the version that's sent to the user reflects the latest updates you've made. So now that we've done with this basic test, we can just hit Control-C to exit the server, and we're done for now.